The Davy Playsuit is knit top down, first knit flat to create the button band down the front, and then joined in the round before knitting the legs, followed by the sleeves using the magic loop technique. The yarn I will be using today is Sandnes Garn Alpakka, which is 100% alpaca yarn. It is very, very soft. So if you're knitting for a tiny little baby, it's a great choice, and it's also going to grow a lot while blocking. It's going to look pretty tiny while you're knitting it, and then you'll notice after you block it, it's going to grow pretty significantly. You're going to need, for the smallest size, 3 balls of this yarn. The gauge for this pattern is 30 stitches by 26 rows, and that's 4 by 4 inches or 10 by 10 centimeters in the knit 2 purl 2 ribbing. We're going to need a few different needles, and the sizes of them are a recommendation. This is going to be based on what you need to obtain gauge. So when you knit a gauge swatch, if you're hitting gauge with the needles that I've recommended, great. If not, you might need to go up or down in needle size to obtain that gauge. So I have knit this pattern in US 6 4mm needles for the main portion of the body and sleeves and legs. And you're going to need that in 2 different cord lengths, a 16-inch cord as well as a 24+ inch cord. So that's a longer cord for magic loop when we get to those portions of the legs and the sleeves. You're also going to need a US 2.5 3mm needle and a 24+ inch cord for the ribbing. For notions, we are going to require a tapestry needle, 10 stitch markers, a stitch holder or scrap yarn to put the legs and sleeves on hold. You're going to need 7 buttons for the smallest size, and those buttons should be about 1.5 centimeters in diameter. We're ready to get started with the cast on. We're doing a long tail cast on today. So go ahead and grab a long tail of yarn here. We're going to be casting on 68 stitches. So I'm going to start with a slip knot, wrapping the yarn around my finger 3 times, pulling the middle strand over the top strand once, again grabbing the middle strand, pulling it over twice, and then one last time, and I can remove the yarn from my finger. I'm going to grab my 3mm needles, so my smaller needles, and place that into the slip knot. And now we can get started with our long tail cast on. So I'm going to place my index finger and my thumb through both strands of yarn here, and then I'm going to go under the bottom strand, grab the top strand and pull through, under the bottom, grabbing the top, and then through that loop. So I have 3 stitches on the needle. Again, I have created a triangle here. I'm going under the bottom strand, grabbing the top strand, through the loop. So there's 4 stitches. You need to cast on a total of 68 stitches. I've cast on my 68 stitches. We are now going to get started on row 1, which is a wrong side row. We are going to knit 1, purl 1 to the end of the row. So I am knitting into the first stitch, purling into the second stitch, knit, purl, knit, purl, all the way to the end. At the end, I am turning my work, and once again, we're going to knit 1, purl 1, all the way to the end on this right side row. So knit 1, purl 1 to the end once again. Okay, now you have the option to add in some very simple short rows just for the next 2 rows. If you want to omit the short rows, just go ahead and do the same thing on the wrong side and the right side one more time. So you'll knit 1, purl 1 to the end on the wrong side, knit 1, purl 1 to the end on the right side if you don't want to do the short rows. If you do want to go ahead and try the short rows, we're going to start on the wrong side here, and we're going to work in pattern for 46 stitches. So I'm counting while still working in knit purls. 1, 2, 3, 4, and go ahead and work 46 stitches. I've worked 46 stitches. I'm now going to turn my work and I'm going to create a double stitch. So the first stitch on this left hand needle is going to come over to my right hand needle. I just slipped it over. Now I'm going to take my yarn and pull it over top of the needle, and I've created 2 legs of a stitch there. I'll show that again. So I have the first stitch on my left hand needle. I'm slipping it over to my right hand needle, and then I am pulling my yarn just up and over my right hand needle. Now I'm going to work in pattern for 23 stitches. So once again counting 1, 2, 3, working 23 stitches. 23 stitches have been worked, and I'm turning my work again. I need to make sure my yarn is in front to create the double stitch. So again, taking my first stitch on my left hand needle over to my right hand needle and pulling the yarn up and over. Since we'll be starting with a purl stitch here, again, I'll bring my yarn to the front. So we have another double stitch created right there. Now I'm just going to work in pattern until the end of the row. When you encounter this double stitch, you're going to just work it as if it's 1 stitch. I'll show you how to do that. I'm at the double stitch, and the next stitch in pattern is a purl stitch. So I'm going to go in through both strands there and purl them as if they're 1 stitch. And then I'm just continuing on in pattern till the end. Okay, last row for the neckline here is we're going to, once again, just work across until the end and working that double stitch in pattern as 1 stitch. Okay, it's time to get started with our setup row for the smallest size here. Make sure if you're knitting one of the larger sizes and following along with the written pattern that you've purchased, that you're looking at the numbers for your size while following these techniques here, because they're going to be different numbers for the bigger sizes. Okay, so we are going to grab our larger needles, the ones that you need to obtain gauge for this pattern. For me, that's my 4mm needles, and you're going to get some stitch markers as well. We are on a wrong side row here, and we are going to start with purl 7, and that's to create the button placket. Okay, so I'm going in here with my larger needles. They're right here, no stitches on them yet. I still have my stitches on my 3mm needles, and I'm going to purl 7 onto the new needle. Okay, I'm going to place my first marker here, and now I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, and that is the right front section. And I'm going to grab another stitch marker, place it on the needle. Now I am going to purl 2 stitches, grabbing another stitch marker, placing it on. These are the 2 raglan stitches in here. Now I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, place marker. This is the section for the right sleeve, purl 2. Those are the raglan stitches, placing another marker. Now we're going to knit 2, purl 2 for 20 stitches. Knit 2, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've done my knit 2, purl 2 for 20 stitches, and now I need to finish that off by knitting 2 more. So there's 22 stitches worked. I'm going to grab another marker, purl 2, place another marker, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, place marker, purl 2, place marker. So this right here is the left sleeve, and now we're about to work the left front panel. So that is going to be knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, place marker. And now we are going to purl 7 for the left button placket. It is time to start our raglan increases, while at the same time we are going to add our first buttonhole at the end of this first row. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to start here. So this is row 1, it is an increase row, and it is a buttonhole row. We are going to start with knit 7, slip marker, work in pattern to marker, make 1 right. So I'm going to pick up this bar here. There's a bar between the 2 stitches, this one and this one. You'll see this strand of yarn connecting them. I'm going to pick it up and put it on my needle this way. We don't want to have it this way because that's what we'll do for our make 1 left. For our make 1 right, I want it to look like this. I'm going to go in through that strand here and knit into it. So there's make 1 right, I'll show that again. Grabbing the strand of yarn between the 2 stitches, placing it this way on my needle, going in through this leg, and knitting it. So I've just increased 1 stitch here. I'm going to slip marker, knit 2, slip marker, and we're ready to make 1 left this time. So I'm looking for that bar in between the 2 stitches. Instead of placing it like this, we're now going to reverse it and put it backwards on our needle. Okay, this one can be tricky to pick up. You can loosen the yarn a little bit here with your finger. We're going in through the back strand here instead of the front. Okay, so I'm grabbing that back strand and knitting into it. I'll show that again. This is make 1 left. Placing my strand on the needle, loosening it just a little bit so I can get in there, in through the back strand, and knitting into it. So there's our make 1 left. We've increased on both sides of the raglan stitches with a make 1 right and a make 1 left. And now we can continue here. We're once again going to work in pattern until the marker. We've reached the marker, so we are going to make 1 right, slip marker, knit 2, slip marker, make 1 left, working in pattern until the marker. I've reached the marker. Again, I'm going to make 1 right, slip marker, knit 2, slip marker, make 1 left, work in pattern until marker, make 1 right, slip, knit 2, slip, make 1 left. Work in pattern until the last marker, and we are not going to increase at this last marker. This one just indicates that we're about to just knit these stitches for the button placket, but remember we're adding a buttonhole this time. So to create our first buttonhole, we are going to knit 1. Then we're going to knit these next 2 stitches together. I'm going to go in through both of these stitches, grab the yarn, and now I've knit them together. We're next going to yarn over. So I'm going to take my yarn and just place it over top of my needle. That's a yarn over. And now we're going to knit 4. Great. Now you'll notice that the buttonhole does not seem like it's centered within these 7 button placket stitches. You'll notice that when we're finished, This button placket is going to curve in just a little bit because it's in plain stockinette stitch, and it's going to then make it look like this buttonhole is in the center. So if you're a perfectionist and you're worried about that, don't let it bother you right now. You'll see in the end that it's going to look like it's right in the middle. So now that we've created our first buttonhole, you don't have to worry about that again for 12 more rows. Okay, so for the next few increase rounds, you're just going to be knitting those last 7 stitches. Let's go to the wrong side. So on the wrong side, you will never be increasing. You're just going to work all of the stitches in pattern, which means knitting them how they appear. So even though on the right side, we knit these 7 button placket stitches, on the wrong side, you can see there's purl bumps. So by knitting them how they appear, that means we're going to purl 7. All right, so purling 7. If this seems complicated, it's going to become intuitive very soon. You won't have to look at the pattern or watch this video to get through the whole raglan section. All right, so we've worked those how they appear. Now we are slipping the marker. You can see these are knit stitches here. There's a loop or a little V instead of a bump. So these are knit stitches. I'm just going to knit them, purl the purl stitches, knit the knit stitches. So you might not have been able to tell so easily what that make 1 stitch should be, but remember we're doing this in a knit 2, purl 2 pattern. So if you have knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, what does your next stitch need to be? A purl stitch, right? And then we'll again have another purl stitch when we increase the next time. Okay, so purl 2. These ones don't count in our patterning. These are the raglan stitches. They're always going to be knit on the right side, purled on the wrong side. Go ahead and work all the way to the end. We are now back on the right side row, which is an increase row. So we start with our knit 7 for the button placket, slip marker. Okay, so we are going to increase again, and I'm just going to try and explain this in a way where you don't need my help or to follow along with the video in order to do this. So you're going to work in pattern until the marker. At the marker, you will make 1 right, knit 2, make 1 left. Then you're going to work in pattern until the marker, make 1 right, knit 2, make 1 left, work in pattern all the way to the marker, make 1 right, knit 2, make 1 left. Okay, so basically anytime you hit these markers, you're going to be increasing on either side. Remember, except for this very last one, because that just indicates the button placket. We don't need increases at these 2 first markers. Okay, so working in pattern to the first marker, and we are going to make 1 right, knit 2, make 1 left. Okay, go ahead and continue working in pattern to those markers, increasing, and then we'll meet back up on the wrong side. Back on the right side row where we're going to increase again, but I want you to watch this because it's going to change just a little bit. So we knit the 7 button placket stitches, slip the marker, work in pattern until marker. Okay, so you see before the marker, I've just completed knitting 2 stitches. So what happens if we make 1 right again? We will have 3 knit stitches in a row. And of course we don't want that because our pattern is purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, not knit 3. So we need to make 1 right, purl. You're going to do the same thing, placing the bar on the needle here, but instead of knitting into this stitch, you're going to purl into this stitch. Okay, so you're just grabbing the yarn purlwise, purling that stitch, and there we go. Now we are continuing the pattern. So slip marker, knit 2, and make 1 left purl. Okay, so nothing changes with the placement of the increases, just you need to pay attention to the patterning. If there's already 2 knit stitches, you need to make 1 right purl. If there's already 2 purl stitches, you need to make 1 right. All right, so always continuing those increases in pattern. Another wrong side row, working stitches and slipping markers. Right side, this is another increase row with make one right purl and make one left purl. Wrong side, working across in pattern. Great, so you've just completed 4 increase rows, or 8 right side and wrong side rows combined. You're going to continue working these rows until you have increased a total of 13 increase rows. All right, so we've already done 4. That means you need to do 9 more increase rows, or 18 more rows total with the right side and the wrong side. You can take out the Notes app on your phone, or again, just do a little tally. Every time you come to the right side here, that's going to count towards one of your total 13 increase rows. I want to just make sure I explain this clearly for everyone. So we have worked this right side a total of 4 times already. We are going to get to 13, okay? So 13 minus 4 that we've already done is 9. You are going to work across the right side 9 more times. Once you have finished that, we will meet back up, okay? Okay, I've just finished my 13th increase, and now we are ready to count all of our stitches before we separate for body and sleeves. So we should have 172 stitches total for the smallest size here, but we can break that down section by section. So our first button placket should have 7 stitches, followed by 19 stitches for the front panel, 2 raglan stitches, 32 stitches across the first sleeve, 2 raglan stitches. The back panel should have 48 stitches, another 2 raglans, and then it will be the same on this side, 32, 2, 19, and 7. Okay, so 172 stitches total. If you've just finished that 13th increase row, that brings you to the wrong side. Go ahead and work across the wrong side, which I've already done, and then you can meet me back here on the right side to separate. We are going to start by knitting 7, slip marker, work in pattern to marker. Okay, I'm at the marker. We have a few more increases to do as we're separating, just to even out, because as you see, we have 1 knit stitch here. We'd like to continue working in pattern, so we're going to make 1 right, remove marker, knit 2, remove marker, and we are going to place the next 32 sleeve stitches on hold. So go ahead and grab your darning needle, as well as some scrap yarn or stitch holders. And just slipping those 32 sleeve stitches onto this needle. And you can pull them through onto the yarn as you go. You can take that marker off, it's gonna fall off anyways. And then I'm just tying a bow here. Okay, I'm going to cast on 2 stitches at the underarm using the backwards loop method. So I'm placing the yarn over my thumb here, and I'm just going to slip that bottom strand onto the needle, and that's going to create a loop. Doing that again, placing the yarn over my thumb, slipping the needle through, and there's 2 stitches. Knit 2, remove marker. We are going to make 1 left here. And now we are going to work in pattern until the next marker. I've arrived at the marker. I'm going to make 1 right, remove marker, knit 2, remove marker. And we are going to now place the next 32 stitches on hold once again, grabbing some scrap yarn and my darning needle. Casting on 2 stitches using the backwards loop method once again. 1, 2. Going to remove this marker if it hasn't fallen off already. Knit 2. Remove marker, make 1 left, Work in pattern to marker. Slip this marker. We're going to keep these two end markers on so that we're reminded of our button placket. They're always knit on the right side, purled on the wrong side, unless of course it's a buttonhole row. We are just going to continue working in pattern until the body measures 7 inches from the underarm. And at the underarm stitches, you're just going to continue them in pattern. So all the way across, maintaining the button placket stitches and making sure to remember to add your buttonholes, okay? So continue working for 7 inches and we will meet back up there. Okay, the body is now measuring 7 inches from the underarm to the needle cord, and we are ready to join in the round. So what we're going to do is work in pattern until we reach the last 7 stitches, so this button placket here on the left side, and you can remove the markers as you go. So just working all the way to the last 7 stitches, removing these markers. I've reached the last 7 stitches here, and now I'm going to grab a spare needle, and I'm going to slip these 7 stitches onto that spare needle. Okay, so now I'm going to pull them onto this cord here, and I'm placing my button placket with the buttonholes over top of the button placket without the buttonholes. And now we're going to knit these 2 plackets together. So I am going to grab my working yarn, push both of these stitches up onto the end of the needles, and I'm going in through this first leg here, then grabbing the first leg of the stitch on the needle behind and knitting them together. So there's one. Once again, I'm going to grab this stitch, the one behind, knit them together, 2, 3, and I'm just making sure to work all 7 stitches on both needles. Okay, so our body is now joined in the round. You can get rid of that spare needle. Now we are just going to work 1 round in pattern until we arrive back at this first button placket stitch. All right, so stopping right here before we reach the button placket. Now that we've arrived back at these 7 stitches, we are going to knit 2, purl 2, knit 1, knit 2 together. Okay, so now we have established the knit 2, purl 2 patterning all the way around the body. We now have a setup round before we get ready for the short rows at the back. So we are going to work 51 stitches in pattern. So count as you're knitting the knit 2, purl 2 patterning, or we're starting with purl 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 51 stitches worked. I worked 51 stitches and now I am placing a marker. Now we will be working 54 stitches in pattern. After you've worked 54 stitches, you'll be placing a marker. We are back at the beginning of round at the front center here, and we're going to be doing some increases. As this pattern has gone through the testing process, the way that the increases happen have changed very slightly. So I'm going to show you on this version that I'm knitting right now. This is the 6-month size, so if it doesn't look exactly like the size that you're knitting right now, which is the smallest size, don't worry. The increases are going to be the same regardless. So we are going to start by slipping the marker, purling 1 stitch, and then make 1 left purl, creating a little bit of slack here so I can get in through the back of that stitch and purling into it. I'm now going to work in pattern until 1 stitch before this back marker. On the way there, make sure when you come to that double stitch that you're working it as 1 stitch in pattern. I have arrived at 1 stitch before the marker, and I'm going to make 1 right. Okay, not make 1 right purl, just make 1 right. Knit 1, okay, slip marker, work 1 stitch in pattern and make 1 left. Great, now you're going to work in pattern to 1 stitch before the front marker. 1 stitch before the front marker, and we are going to make 1 right purl. Purl 1 and slip marker. Next, we're going to work 1 round in pattern, but you're going to make sure to work the stitches as they appear. So in the back, you're going to encounter 4 knit stitches in a row, and you're going to knit them as 4 knit stitches in a row. These stitches are all going to be bound off very soon, so we're going to just knit them as they appear for this next round. So go ahead all the way back to the front marker. Okay, we are now going to be binding off some stitches to get ready to separate for the legs. So we're going to start by working 52 stitches in pattern. I've knit 52 stitches, and now we are going to bind off these 8 stitches back here. So I'm going to knit into the first stitch, knit into the second stitch, pass the first stitch over top, and bind it off. There's 1, 2, 3, go ahead and take that marker off, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, and now you can go ahead and work 47 stitches in pattern. I've worked 47 stitches, and again, we're going to bind off these 8 stitches here. So knitting into the first stitch, second stitch, passing that stitch over. There's 1, 2, 3, remove your marker, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Go ahead and work in pattern to the back here where the gap is, so stop right here. I've reached the back center gap here, and I'm now going to be putting the 48 right leg stitches on hold. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle and some scrap yarn and slip these stitches off the needle, putting them on hold. Okay, so we are ready to work our left leg here. You're going to want to grab your longer cord, 4mm needles, and we're going to just slip the stitches off of our 16-inch cord onto our 24-inch or longer cord for magic loop. I have all of my left leg stitches on this longer cord now, and I'm going to count 24 stitches to split them up onto each needle. I'm now going to pull the cord through. Okay, so I have both needles in my left hand, and I'm going to bring my working yarn over that back needle, and we are ready to get started with magic loop. So the first step here is to pull that back needle so that your stitches are now resting on the cord and you're ready to hold that back needle in your right hand. We are starting with 2 purl stitches here because that pattern's already established. So I'm going to bring my yarn in front, and I'm going to purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. I just worked the last stitch on needle 1, and now I am turning my work back up, pull the stitches I've just worked off of the needle onto the cord to rest, and I'm going to work the stitches on needle 2. Okay, so my needle 2 stitches have been worked, turning to face back at the front now, pulling these stitches back up. So that was 1 full round. I worked across needle 1, then I turned, worked across needle 2, and turned. We're back at the beginning. I'll show you that one more time. So I am starting on needle 1 now with 2 purl stitches. I've knit across needle 1 again, turning my work. I've pushed my needle 2 stitches back up, and now we're ready to work across needle 2. Needle 2 is complete, turning back on the front. So that was 2 full rounds we've done. We are going to continue working until this leg is measuring 5 inches from the bind off point here. All right, so just continue working across needle 1, turning, needle 2, turning, until your leg measures 5 inches. The leg is now measuring 5 inches, and we're ready to get started with our ribbing. So we're going to get our longer cord, 3mm needles, and we're going to just slip all of the leg stitches onto the smaller needles. All of my stitches are now on the 3mm needles, and we are going to switch the patterning now. So we will be doing a knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, repeat. So instead of knit 2, purl 2, it's now knit 1, purl 1. All right, so let's continue all the way across needle 1 and all the way across needle 2. So I'm going to start by cutting off a strand of yarn about 3 times the circumference of the leg here. So I'm just kind of looping it around to see the length there. So that looks to be about 3 times the circumference. And I'm going to grab my tapestry needle, thread the yarn through, and we are ready to get started. So we're first going to start with 2 setup movements. I'm going to go in through this first knit stitch here purlwise and bring my yarn through. I'm actually just going to hide this back needle by tucking it into my knitting back here so it's not in the way. So we've just done that first movement. Now I'm going to bring my yarn in through the back between these 2 stitches here. And then I'm bringing it in knitwise through this second stitch. And bringing it through the back. Okay, so those are our setup movements. Okay, so this Italian bind off is going to follow a 4 movement repeat. So we're going to start with the first stitch here, and we're going to drop it off the needle knitwise. So you'll see I didn't go in through the stitch this way. I'm going in through this side of the stitch and dropping it off. Next, I'm going to go in through the second stitch here purlwise and leaving it on the needle. Next, I'm going into the first stitch purlwise and dropping it off. Okay, this next and final movement seems like 2, but you're going in through the back and then in through the second stitch knitwise. So that's the same setup movement we did. Okay, so there's those 4 movements complete. We're just going to keep doing that until all of our stitches have been dropped off. So we go in through the first stitch knitwise, drop it off the needle. We go in through this second stitch here purlwise and leave it on. First stitch purlwise, drop it off. And then the back to the front counts as 1 movement there. Okay, make sure you're maintaining tension. You don't want it too tight or too loose. You want it to look like the knit stitch is just continuing all the way off the edge. Okay, I'll show that a couple more times. So knit off, purl on, purl off, and then back and through. Knit off, purl on, purl off, back and through. Okay, so I'm just going to continue that across both needles until we've arrived at the final 2 stitches. When you've arrived at the final stitch of needle 1, you can just pull it along the cord so that it is now joining the needle 2 stitches, and then just continue from there. Okay, we've arrived at the last 2 stitches. We're going to go in through this first stitch as if to knit and drop it off the needle, and the final stitch as if to purl and drop it off the needle as well. Okay, to secure this, I'm going to go in through the next knit stitch over here. You see I have a knit column here and a knit column here. I'm going to go in through the top 2 legs of this knit column and bring my yarn through. And then I'm going to go in again through the first knit column over here. I'm now going to grab my long cord 4mm needles and place the 48 leg stitches back onto these needles by just slipping each stitch one by one onto the needle here. While my stitches are on the needle, you can either cut or break your yarn and pull that scrap yarn out. Okay, we're going to divide our stitches for magic loop, so we need 24 stitches on each needle. Okay, so we are back to following a knit 2, purl 2 stitch pattern. So I need to rejoin my yarn here. There's no yarn ball attached to this second leg. So I'm just going to go in and knit 2, purl 2, across needle 1 and needle 2. I'm back at the first stitch on the first needle, and since this is where our new ball of yarn is attached, this stitch will be loose for this next round. Just make sure that you go ahead and tighten it back up after you knit it. So you see how big that stitch became? I'm just going to go in and find the yarn, the tail of yarn attached to it, and pull it tight. Okay, you might have to do that a couple more times as you go row by row, but it will end up securing itself. Okay, so we're just going to continue in that knit 2, purl 2 patterning until this second leg also measures 5 inches here. Then you're going to switch to your smaller needles and do a knit 1, purl 1 patterning for 3 inches, and then go in with your Italian bind off. So this second leg is knit the exact same way as the first leg, and then we will meet back up for the arms. All right, I have both of my legs finished here, and don't worry, we'll come back and seam at the end. We're now going to get started with the arms. So I've already knit my first arm here, and I will go ahead and show you how I've done that on the second arm. We're going to grab our long cord 4mm needles, or the larger needles that you need to obtain gauge. And I'm going to start by slipping all of my sleeve stitches onto this needle, and then breaking or cutting the scrap yarn. All of my 32 sleeve stitches are on the cord now, and I'm going to divide them for magic loop. So we need 16 stitches on each needle. Okay, I have 16 stitches on each needle. Both of the needles are in my left hand. I'm going to slip the back needle forwards, which drops these stitches onto the cord. We're going to get started by looking at the 2 stitches at the underarm here. So these are the stitches we cast on using the backwards loop method when we were dividing for body and sleeves. Okay, so there is one stitch you'll see that is closer to my left-hand needle, and then one stitch that's closer to this right side. So we're going to start with the stitch that's closer to the left side, and that's where we're going to be joining our yarn. So I'm going to grab my working yarn here, and I'm going to go in through the center of this stitch, and I'm going to pull this working yarn through that stitch there. Make sure that you're holding the yarn that's attached to the ball. You don't want to be holding the tail end of yarn over your finger to knit with. Okay, or else you're going to run out of yarn very quickly. So we're looking for now the strand of yarn between the 2 stitches. I have a stitch on my right hand needle and this last stitch on my left hand needle. I'm going in through the bar here between them, placing it on my needle, and I'm going to knit that stitch through the back loop. Okay, so I've picked up an extra stitch there. Next, I'm going to be working in pattern until the end of needle 1. So you'll see we're starting with a knit stitch, and then we're purling 2, knit 2. Oh, I have picked up an extra loop there. Okay, knit 2, and just continue in pattern until the end of needle 1. I've reached the end of needle 1. I'm going to turn my work, going to pull these stitches that were resting on the cord back onto the needle. And just to orient yourself, you can make sure you have both stitches on the needle. These are the ones we just worked back here. That's needle 1. I've pulled the stitches for needle 2 back up onto the needle, Now I'm going to drop the stitches from needle 1 onto the cord back there, and I'll be working the stitches on needle 2. So I start with a knit stitch here, and then I am purling 2, knit 2. I've worked to the end of needle 2. Now we need to start by picking up that bar in between the stitches. So I'm going to grab this strand of yarn here, knit it through the back loop, and now I'm looking for that second stitch that was the backwards loop cast on. And I'm going to go in through the center of that stitch, grab my yarn, and pull through. Okay, we're going to now turn. You can see that first stitch has become very loose, so you're just going to look for that tail end of yarn and you can tighten it up. It will only be loose for the first couple rounds that you'll need to keep tightening, and then it will secure itself. Okay, so now we're going to be establishing the pattern here. So we are going to start with a purl 1, knit 2, and then you'll see that we already have our established pattern over here. Purl 2, knit 2, all the way to the end of needle 1. Turn work, drop the back stitches. On needle 2, we start with knit 1, purl 2. At the last 3 stitches here, we need to establish the pattern again. So these 2 are knit 2 and then purl 1. You are going to continue working in pattern until the sleeve measures 4 inches, and then we will meet back up to start our 1x1 ribbing on the 3mm needles. My sleeve was now measuring 4 inches from the underarm in my 2x2 rib pattern, and I have switched to my 3mm needles, and I am doing my knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 all the way around until this section of the ribbing measures 3 inches. Okay, we are ready to start our Italian bind off on the sleeve here. I'm just going to hide this back needle so it doesn't get in my way. And we will start again with our 2 setup movements. So purling into the first stitch and then in through the back of the 2 stitches, and then in knitwise through that second stitch on the needle. So we're all set up now and we can start that 4 movement repeat. So I am going in through the first stitch knitwise and slipping it off the needle. In through this second stitch purlwise, leaving it on the needle. First stitch purlwise, slipping it off the needle. In through the back, and then knitwise through that second stitch. Okay, so there's those 4 steps. I'll show that again one more time. So knit off, purl on, purl off, through the back, and in through the second stitch. Okay, go ahead and continue that all the way around. Legs and sleeves now finished, and we are ready to start our seaming. So I'm going to take once again my darning needle and a strand of yarn. Make sure it's not scrap yarn, it should be yarn that matches the yarn that you just knit in. Okay, on the right side I'm going to be joining this together and we are going to be looking for the edge. So I'm going to be looking for 2 legs of a stitch near the opening here. Then I'm going to grab 2 legs of a stitch on the other side. Okay.
followed by 2 legs up here. And just kind of working back and forth. You'll see the legs are harder to find when we get into the purl stitches. You kind of have to dig for the legs. You see how there's purl bumps, and then you dig in between them and you're going to find 2 legs of a stitch. What this is doing is kind of making it look like the stitches are connecting here. So you're not going to have as much of a seam line as you would if you were doing this from the wrong side. But again, it's not as simple when there's knits and purl stitches involved. So just do your best to follow one by one. It ends up pretty seamless on the right side, and then you have the seam on the wrong side. So you can go ahead now and bring your tail end of yarn to the wrong side and weave that in both of your wrong sides. You can finish up any other weaving in you have to do on the wrong side of your work, and we'll get ready to start the buttons. We are now ready to add on our buttons. My tapestry needle does not fit through the buttonholes of the specific ones I'm using. If you find that's the case for you, you can go ahead and grab a sewing needle, which is just a little bit harder to thread, but will work just fine. I'm going to line up this first button with the buttonhole and keep it in place. Make sure you're unraveling this button band because it will curl in. So we want to add the button to the center of this button band. Okay, I'm going to go in through the back, leaving a tail here so that we can knot the yarn together at the end. I'm going to go in 2 or 3 times through these holes. Then I'm just going to double knot and trim the end here. And then we can go right into the next buttonhole. I like to button these up as I go, just to try and get as accurate of a distance as possible for each button. So next one, remembering to unravel this button band. Make sure it lines up. Okay, continue that same method all the way down for all of your buttons, and then I will show you how I block this project. Okay, I filled up a bowl with some lukewarm water. You can also do this directly in the sink if you'd like. And I'm just going to submerge my project, making sure it soaks up water in all areas. You can also add wool wash to this if you would like. And I'm just going to leave it in here to soak for about 20 minutes. Now that I've squeezed out as much water as I can with my hands, I'm going to be rolling it up in this towel here, squeezing as much of the remaining water out as I can.
And as you can see now, I've brought it over to my blocking mats and I've got it all pinned out. This step is not mandatory. You can just lie it flat to dry on a carpet or out on your deck if it's warm out. I just find that one, it's habit for me to block my knits after I finish, but also it just kind of helps my stitches relax and even out any tension problems that I was having. So you can go ahead and leave it to dry for a couple of days and then you are all finished. I hope you have enjoyed knitting this pattern with me today. I think it is an incredibly sweet playsuit. It looks very, very cute on, and it's just a joy to knit up, in my opinion. I hope you had fun with it as well. Please be sure to follow me on Instagram at Kabora Knits to stay up to date with upcoming patterns. Please also be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope to see you at the next one. Happy knitting!